Good morning, everyone. We are pleased to have Qusai joining us today. He's going to talk with us about mind and body, leadership, all around the subject that we've been talking about this week so far, which is mental wellness and personal growth. So with that, Q, we'll leave it with you.
Awesome. Good morning. How's everybody doing? I'm excited. I think this is going to be a fun session. I hope you guys will join me in questions or just kind of back and forth. So wanted to start with Aristotle, right? He said, knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of knowing ourselves. But let's start with, what if I was to say every one of you is an addict? Yeah, every one of you. And most of you would say, no, I'm not addicted to drugs. I don't drink much. Heck, I'm not even a workaholic. Most of us are, of course, right? but so let's put that aside for a second, okay? And so the three main things I want to cover today are addiction, right? Knowing thyself, really, and then this concept of electromagnetic energy, right? So I'm going to stop sharing now and really let's just have a dialogue, right? So stop that. Okay, cool. So let's take a real example. Whether you're a leader, you're a salesperson, and you have this amazing product or a service that you're trying to sell, and your prospect, just every time you go to this prospect, they want something else. They want some more features, they want more discounts. Really, really frustrating, right? Because you want to be able to, that this is going to change their world, and know it's going to be a really big benefit, but they just don't see it, right? And so what is happening here? You actually are addicted to this very specific outcome, right? So that's another way of kind of thinking about addiction, right? Because we always think about, like I said, addiction about drugs and stuff, but you are addicted to this particular outcome, right? And so, some of you are thinking, well, heck, I want my salesperson to be after this thing. I want them to keep going at it, right? But what I am hoping that we can do today, right? I'm hoping that I can convey to you and that you can walk away with is this knowledge that there is a lot more power that you can get when you leverage the cosmos, right? When you go to this non-physical part of you and really use that, leverage that, because that will make you a good leader, a good salesman, a good wife, good spouse, a good daughter, a good whatever you want to be, right? So let's start with some basic kind of universal laws, as they are called, right? And let's start with the law of attraction, right? How many people have heard about the law of attraction or know about the law of attraction? Like, with a quick show of hands. I don't know, John, you can help me if you see anybody raising their hand or not, but uh, you know, uh, so the law of attraction really is the definition, is the maintaining a focus on a preconceived image that then attracts or the manifestation of that very image, right? So again, maintaining focus on a preconceived image, right? So essentially, it's all about asking for what you want, right? Asking it properly. It's a inclusive law, not a law of exclusion. So as you know, if you keep saying, I don't want this particular guy to come and meet me, I don't want this, I don't want that, the law of attraction does not recognize that as you don't want. It recognizes your focus. And so you will get a lot more of what you don't want, right? And it's also about, saying what you want, but then allowing that to come into your experience, right? So that's kind of, in a nutshell, the law of attraction, right? And the other universal law that's not, talked about that much is the law of repulsion, right? Have you, anybody heard about law of repulsion? Show of hands, quickly. No? Anybody want? Okay. Anybody want to take a pass at it? John, we can't hear you.
Yeah, so Robert is joining by audio as well. He's
Awesome.
yeah.
Robert, you want to tell us about law of repulsion?
See if we can get him on.
Swag at it. You may have to unmute.
There we go.
That's a new one to me. I've heard of law of attraction, but not the second one.
Okay. And what about the law of attraction in your from your perspective? What is that? Can you define that for us?
So a lot of it has to do, I think, with mentality, knowing what you want, being crystal clear on it, and staying focused on it. And then the way, you just eventually attract it to you. That's the way I took it when I read that book, The Secret.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. Yeah. So yeah, allowing that, the hardest part is allowing it into your experience, right? It's already there, but it's just getting it into our experience. So the law of repulsion, interestingly enough, its definition is almost the same, but instead of maintaining the focus, it's being addicted to this preconceived image actually repels the manifestation of that very image, right? So, I mean, we've seen this all the time, right? You have a spouse or even the board that you're working with, and you want them, to agree to a particular thing, and this is what you want, and they don't consistently, right? And because you're repelling that, because you're addicted to that particular outcome, right? So that's, if you go back to our original example where we were trying to sell this amazing product and or a service, and this prospect is just not budging, it's mostly because you are repelling that, because you are addicted to that outcome, right? So then the question is, well, great, now we know that. So what can I do about that, right? So let's go back to our first example about trying to sell this product or service, right? So how do you kind of promote this addiction to what I call a preference, right? So, but let's think about kind of what this addiction really is, right? So addiction is when you become almost neurotic about it. Even if you were to get it, you will want more of it, right? It's in our personal life, if it's a girlfriend or somebody that we're trying to attract, and we and they're just not responding, and even if they respond, then we want more. It's that addiction, it's that thing that it's never enough, right? But a preference, on the other hand, right, is where you can feel ecstatic if that girlfriend calls you, even more ecstatic if they meet you, but then if they don't, it's okay, right? Same thing with our example on the salesperson trying to close a deal. Because if that prospect calls them and says, oh, I think I'm getting to understand what you want, great. And then they call you in and say, I think I'm ready to sign, you're ecstatic. But if they don't call you and they're just kind of ignoring all your emails, instead of getting super frustrated and going neurotic on them, you say it's okay. It's just okay. And that's the difference between an addiction and preference, right? So let's take a few moments and let's think about, what are we addicted to? So it could be a personal thing, it could be something you're trying to sell to your board, a vision, or it's a product that you're trying to get to the market. Take anything that really causes a lot of stress to you is most likely an addiction. So let's think about that and just close our eyes for a few seconds and say, okay, I'm going to kind of make it go from an obsession and addiction to a preference. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to tell the universe, you know what, it'd be amazing if this thing happens, but if it doesn't, it's okay. Right? So let's do that. Let's see if we can actually make that energy move. Because it'll be pretty, surprising sometimes when you get, your energy to move from being addictive to just making it a preference, everything around that will change, right? So anybody have an experience like that they can share? See some chats going on. I think anybody have any stories that they can tell us about something like that, or something that they're addicted to?
You can jump on since I'm not muted.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, as an entrepreneur and not coming from an entrepreneurial space, I think success is a huge addiction. Because I feel like even though in some people's minds we're successful, like in my own mind, I haven't reached my full potential yet. So I'm always still trying to grow, or I'm always still chasing that thing that is not tangible, but in my mind it exists, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But what is success? Is there a specific outcome?
I feel like it's just a personal emotion.
Okay.
And that's something that maybe if I can set it in stone, then it would end up just turning into a goal.
Correct. But if it's a very specific goal, you might fall into the addiction trap, and that's going to repel it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it might be really good for you to kind of, when you close your eyes and think about saying, well, success to me is awesome, and if I get it, but it's a moving target, sounds like. And so, if it's okay if it happens, if it's okay if it doesn't, then do you think it'd be a lot more easier? Life would be more at ease, you think?
That's something I guess I would have to think about, because I've always had that drive for as long as I can remember.
Sure.
And then of course, you set a goal like, okay, if I hit this goal, I'll be successful, but then it comes too easy. So then you set a bigger goal, and then you set a bigger goal. So I don't know if that goes kind of like with fulfillment versus achievement.
Yeah. No, the drive part is good, right? Because that's the law of attraction side of it. So if you keep your drive, maybe broad and not too specific, and that, and allow that to come into experience, I think that would be very powerful, right? Joe, any thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely have thoughts. And John and I've actually spoken about this a couple of times, so he's gonna sit back and laugh that I'm bringing this up. I mean, for us, with just this conference in general, being able to bring it to the table for so many people has been and was a really big addiction of mine, a year and a half, 2 years ago. And as you and I saw, because I was extremely focused on it, but I believe it was in some of the wrong areas is where I was focusing. And so we had to take a beat and say, you know what, maybe we need to restructure this and think about this a little bit differently so that we ensure that we bring the value that we're trying to bring to the table. And so, and we did that. And that was that moment. And, you and I spoke about it too, where you just had to say, okay, you know what, I want to do this thing and we want to be able to provide this value, but we're okay with the outcome. And John's been really good at keeping that tone for me personally throughout the last couple of months, ramping up to what, we're sitting here doing today. And so sometimes I think you can find, if you have a really great circle of people around you, they can help you establish some of that as well. Like you do that for me. We talk, and when I feel unbalanced, I call Q and I say, I'm completely unbalanced. What am I doing wrong? What do I need to focus on? What do I not need to focus on? And it's really helpful. So, it goes back to that, having those people in your life that can help you with that kind of spiritual cosmo journey.
Yeah. In fact, you're hitting the electromagnetic side of the house, so we're gonna get to that soon. But Absolutely. And I think in that particular example that you were saying, it was the law of attraction making some of these things come into your experience. As long as you are not addicted to saying, 500 people should show up. Because once you get to that, then it's getting addictive, and then you're repelling it. So there's a fine balance there. And that's why it's important to, just recognize the addiction. And I've personally seen that, especially in the sales situation for me, or even if it's a family thing and I'm trying to get my father to understand something and he just doesn't see it. But when I, intentionally, move myself from feeling, okay, it's just a preference, I really would like him to think about it this way, it becomes a whole lot easier. Then, interestingly enough, he does start thinking like that. Go figure. So the cosmos is an extremely powerful force. If we can just learn how to leverage it, right? So a question that I get all the time is like, well, so then what do I do as a practice? What do I need to change? So I understand the law of attraction. I now know the law of repulsion. Um, what else do I need to do on a daily basis? And one thing that I do every day today as well is that I get up in the morning and kind of figure out really the know thyself is a very powerful thing, right? So we all leaders, right? Know that they're a work in progress, right? We're lifetime learners, we're lifetime adapters, and so if you can keep that in mind, you will be a good leader. So when you get up, the question that you need to ask is, who am I? And this is not that deep, kind of deep thought kind of question. It's more about, who am I going to show up as today, right? Whether it's at work or at home. And what I'd like to walk through is like 3 scenarios that we normally, or personas that we fall into, and then let's unpack it. Okay, let's unpack it together and see what should we be. So the idea is the true self, right? Some people call it superconscious. It's our true self. And then we'll talk about the personas as being the other self. I call it the other self. So one of them is, you could get up, feeling victimized, feeling burdened, meaning, the world, is making you do things. Everything is being done to you, right? That's kind of a victim mentality. All of us go through this occasionally. I'm sure you know people who are in that mood all the time. That's one. The other one is, when you get up or when you are going to the office, like, oh my God, I do not want to meet this person today because it's going to drive me crazy. Or I really don't want to talk to this customer because he's always has some problem or the other. That's kind of the avoider, right? The avoider persona. And the third one is where it's super controlling. It's like almost overbearing, saying, I can do anything. Ego has taken over. It doesn't matter. I will get this, boom, boom, boom. I will do this action and I will get this outcome, right? That's our third, call it over controlling persona, right? And these are all, I think, good show of hands. I mean, that's not what we want to be, neither of these personas, right? That's the other self. So let's work towards, what do we need to do? So if, sometimes we're a combination of all 3, when we show up. Sometimes we're just being one, right? So let's unpack the first one. So if you think you're showing up as somebody that is feeling victimized, feeling burdened, what do you want to move towards? Like, what's the energy that you want to go towards? John, you want to take a pass at that, or anybody in the audience? What do you want to go from? If you're feeling burdened and victimized, what do you want to be? Or what does your true self want?
Yeah, so in my thoughts, it's I want to get to the point where I have some level of fulfillment and success, right? I want to go from feeling like I'm losing to feeling like, you know what, the lawn is mowed and the lines are going the direction I wanted it. That's pretty amazing to look at. or knowing that during the course of the day, instead of me sitting alone thinking no one likes me, I don't fit in, just I start talking to a homeless person, or I just started talking to the person at the gas station or whatever, and just start proactively trying to think in terms of how far on an infinite scale of what is, or, opposites, can I get away from the other side?
Okay, awesome. And so you want to feel connected. You want to be loving. So it's love, it's affinity, right? That's the energy we want to move towards.
Mm.
So if you're really feeling burdened or victimized, what I'd suggest is you start thinking about love. You start thinking about people that you love. Start feeling that connectedness, because we are all connected, awesome. Our second one then was what we call the avoider, right? We want to avoid a situation, we want to avoid a person. What do you think we want to be really? What does our true self want to be? Robert, do you want to take a pass at this one? What do you think if you were in that avoider mode, you really don't want to be there, what should you be? As an entrepreneur, I'm sure there are days when you want to be that.
I'm sorry, I was going over some stuff with the crew. What was the question?
The question was, if you were if you were feeling like you just want to avoid something rather than avoiding, what would you rather be? Like, what do you think your true self wants to be? Like, you want to show up as?
I think number one, I would have to look at myself and see why I wanted to avoid the situation, and then kind of focus on that, because I mean that's something that I could possibly control.
Okay.
But
from a personality side, what I would suggest is that you think about being magnetic. Is about going from avoiding to being magnetic towards what you really want to come into your experience, right? So you're changing your energy from avoidance to magnetism,
okay.
right? And so that's the second kind of persona to unpack. And the third one is, and as entrepreneurs, as leaders, right? We are almost conditioned from the beginning. Like, if you do this outcome will happen. If you follow this plan, this will be expected. And we get into this controlling mindset. In fact, as leaders, we are almost required to be like, do you know the answer? You're supposed to do that. And we, sometimes the ego takes over. And so we become arrogant. But what do we want to become? What does our true self want to become? Kind of in that scenario, right? And what I would suggest is that we try to get assertive. It's a thin line between arrogance and assertion, right? And so what we want to be is we want to be seen as an authority, right? We want to be seen as not somebody who's over controlling, overbearing, but somebody who's an authority, and then people recognize that authority, and so you can be assertive. So these are the three kind of things where typically, when you answer that "who am I" question in the morning, and at night before sleeping, maybe you take a kind of report and see how you did. Like, how did I show up today? Did I really show up as my other self most of the time, or did I show up as my true self? And as you start doing this as a regular practice, you see the world around you changes, because the more you show up as your true self, the more good things are going to happen, right? So I think there's a question. I think, yeah, okay. So I think, John, you're posting something, everybody?
Yes, I'm posting to the group.
Awesome. Any other thoughts from any of you on that? We've talked about addiction. We've talked about law of attraction, law of repulsion. We talk now about kind of who am I? It's like know thyself, right?
I have a
For-
question for you,
Yeah.
Q.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you talk about when we get up in the morning and saying, okay, how do I want to show up today? But do you feel like there are, and maybe some days more than others, where there are times where you have to do that? You kind of need to do a check-in a couple of times a day.
Sure. Yeah.
What's your advice around that or your thoughts around that?
So I think for me, it's, again, whenever there is stress, whenever there is something that you don't like, is when you should stop. That's when I stop. I stop and I'll do a breathing exercise. Interesting one that I learned just recently, is, when you take a deep breath, and then you take one more sip. So and then you breathe out completely, completely exhale, out with your. It's an amazing thing for your parasympathetic system, and it really calms you down. So that's kind of what I do every time there is, just take 2 or 3 of these breaths, and that's the time when I kind of ask myself, uh, and in those cases, it's not I'm asking who am I, it's like who is reacting, because that essentially is asking who I am, because it's the other self is usually reacting to these situations, not the true self. The true self is just happy as a puppy, right? Because that's, it's aligned to the cosmos, and so it doesn't see all these things. And so if, I just try to think, well, if I'm really getting mad, who's getting mad? Is it the avoider in me? Is it the victimized me, burdened me, or is this over controlling egomaniac me? And most of the time, it's one of these 3. And then when you recognize it and say, okay, if that's the case, then should I be kind of changing my own self? And the hardest part about all this is, right, so because every time something happens, we almost always want to blame something. We want to blame the circumstance. We want to blame the person, the spouse, the destiny. We find lots of things to blame, but really, if you think about it, it's your perception. You have to personally take responsibility for all that is happening, and that's hard. That's
So
hard.
I have a question for you, to help those that are viewing really get some clarity around, or some guidance from you on when we think about the victimized or burden or the avoidance or the controlling person, how much of it can we attribute to the environment they were raised in? Right. I had a person say to me the other day, the reason she picks bad boys is because of her relationship with her father. So how she ended up in an abusive relationship, she thought this is how it's supposed to be. So even in her thing, it was the weirdest thing where she was actually being victimized, but she never thought of herself as the victim. She thought she was doing it. So
Yeah,
help me, or help all of us kind of understand how you would walk through that to help somebody through it.
sure. And that's full topic for a day type of topic as well, because what you are, kind of working towards are unmet needs, right? Those are the things that cause us to behave the way we do, right? And so in that particular case of your example was, she wasn't even aware of being a victim, because that was her way of life, maybe when she was younger. And so there are, 4 or 5 unmet needs that, and for our parents or for our environments, and wherever you were raised, whether it was a particular religion or a culture, all of them were trying to do, the intent was good, but um, we all end up with some unmet need or the other, whether it's, feeling inhibited sometimes, or, being told too many things. I'll give you an example. For me, I was raised in India, in a fairly strict religious environment, where I was told you had to do certain things. And at that time I thought, well, it's just the way it is. Uh, but now, uh, when somebody tells me very specifically to do something, it really bothers me. I bothered about, this, but when I started unpacking that, I realized that there was a lot of resentment from when I was growing up, where I was not able to stand up and say, no, I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to this religious function. I don't want to do this ritual. Um, and I couldn't, because I was young. But now, even though there is no force, but the fact that somebody's telling me triggers that unmet need. And so I react and say, well, it really bothers me. And so that's why I have to stop and say, why is it bothering me? It's not a big deal. I don't have to do it. They can tell me all day what I should do, but I don't have to do it. But it still bothers me. And so, yeah, those unmet needs are something that, is really the true learning, right? Because as you recognize some of those things, you will recognize why you feel that way, and you recognize these personas that you take on. And, so that's why even if you can not sometimes realize that, because there's a whole method to get to that point. Unfortunately, psychologists and psychiatrists, they just try to kind of replay your past trauma, and that just adds to it, because of the law of attraction, you are basically reliving that, and your subconscious doesn't know any better whether you're seeing it in reality or just thinking about it. It's programming it again as a trauma, and that's why they never get out of that. Come back next week. Pay $300 to visit because you're recreating that trauma over and over again. How are you solving the problem? So the idea is that if you can think about it from an energy level, and you hit a good point, is when you get to the unmet need, is when you start kind of reprogramming your subconscious, right? So maybe when we have time, we'll talk a little bit about this, superconscious, conscious, and subconscious. Maybe we'll do an affirmation, how that covers why affirmations are so powerful. If you can cover all of those three things, you can see your true self, you can look at your conscious self, and you can start programming your subconscious. So if you have time, maybe we can get to that. Great point. Okay, so we talked about 3 modes. We went from burden to connected. We went from avoidance to magnetic. We went from controlling to assertive. And all of these states, right, they have, thoughts and feelings, right? So let's think about, thoughts as being electric, and, feelings being magnetic. That is your electromagnetic force. And this is what people don't recognize or realize. This is a resource. It is something that is this energy around you, right? So if you believe in law of attraction, or if you read any of these books, all of us, even physics has now proved, all of us know that there is this energy around us. And so this electromagnetic energy is something we can either replenish, grow, or we can deplete. Right? So it goes back to the same thing, is it? And it's easy to say, well, just keep having positive thoughts. Heck, you see a lot of adversity in our world. People will do things which are hurtful. You see wars happening. So it's unfortunate, right? For news, everything that is bad makes news. And very rarely do you see a newscaster talking about some great things that are happening in the world. Most of the time, it's all the bad things. And so we are constantly bombarded with, whether it's on social media or news, about bad things about. And so I personally don't watch the news. It's been years. And so because that just affects my energy. And so I try to kind of find the things that not only show me the good part about love, or about life, but also actually thinking about positive things, right? So we always, whether Robert was saying success, or, we want to be in this joyful state, right? Happiness, we say, is, short-lived, but we want to be in this kind of joyful, long-term state. And if you want to be in that joyful state, you have some kind of image about what is that, right? So, some of the meditation techniques that I teach, it's about, kind of having this affirmation. It's about hearing it, feeling it, and then seeing it. And so seeing it is most powerful for most people. And so when you see a positive thing, when you feel a positive thing, when you think about a positive thing, you are adding to this electromagnetic field. So what does that do for you? Well, that makes your kind of, when you talk about coming into your experience, you're creating this energy field that's more likely that things that you want will come into your experience. It's a more powerful way of just kind of creating or manifesting your reality versus just sitting there and saying, okay, I'm just going to meditate. Because meditating, essentially what you're doing is you're removing all resistance. And so you're opening your thoughts and you're going to become more aware. This is even more powerful because you are emanating your energy out. You're going to kind of almost attract it in, right? So electromagnetic force is very, very important as a resource. And on the flip side, same thing, right? You start feeling victimized, you start looking at all this bad news, and you start dwelling on some trauma that you've gone through. All of those negative things deplete your electromagnetic kind of energy around you, and that's has this effect where it kind of snowballs. It just kind of does more and more and more, and then you're left with no energy, right? I'm sure we go through all of this stuff all the time, right? Even when people passed away, right? We tend to we say, well, we should be sympathetic and we should go out there and we should mourn with them. Well, when you mourn with them and you get to their energy level, you're actually depleting them more, right? Versus you going there and you staying at a high vibration, you're going to help them come to your level. That's going to be more helpful for them. But it seems counterintuitive. We're not conditioned to be that. We want to go there and kind of relive, their grief and things like that, and say, "Oh, this is terrible, and it happened to me as well." And so you're just making it worse for that person, right?
If you could build on the word vibration, we hear it a lot. I think TikTok and many folks walking around. If you could kind of elaborate, so those that aren't used to it yet, what do you mean by vibration?
So it truly is. It's really about the energy. So it's almost like your electromagnetic field, where you are vibrating at a higher level. Just think about that as a higher frequency. Where when you are at a higher frequency, you're going to attract people and situations which are also at that frequency. If you're going to be at a lower frequency, you're going to attract people who are there. So if you're, and I'm sure everybody has experienced this, if you're, we're in a, feeling terrible and we're thinking about doing something horrible to somebody, you will find people who will come into experience that think that same way, and that they're even doing it that way. And that, unfortunately, that's how criminals and get together in these gangs, because they're feeding off each other, because they're all vibrating at that lower frequency. And so that's kind of an easy way of thinking about, kind of frequency and vibration and things like that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I just wanted to give folks like some reference because I was loving the energy, the magnetic, the electric, the thoughts and the feelings and how they're connected. But we just hear the word vibration so often, vibration and frequency. You're not on my frequency. And so I didn't want people to get a negative connotation like, you're at this base, lower level vibration and you're a nobody kind of thing, right? It's like,
right. Understood. Okay, awesome. So we went through law of attraction and we talked about knowing thyself really. Do we want to talk about affirmations before we kind of wrap up, or?
Oh yeah, let's do affirmations.
Okay, awesome. So the whole idea is, right, and again, when you start doing this regularly, you will see your world change. So let's make up an affirmation. Let's say it's about relationships, because all of us face this. So let's say I would say I am assertive, and um, I'm assertive and reciprocated in my relationships, feeling confident and worthy. Okay. I'm assertive and reciprocated in my relationship, feeling confident and worthy. What, if you were to kind of unpack this, what do you see as the true self, the superconscious, the conscious, and the subconscious? Anybody want to take a swag at that? Anybody else in the audience? Robert, anybody?
Can you repeat that again, Q?
So I am assertive and reciprocated in my relationships, feeling confident and worthy. So I think we talked about earlier, right? We were talking about the 3 personas. And remember, we went from controlling to assertive. So the assertive is the true self part, right? So I am assertive. So, or I'm choosing to be assertive. That's what I want to be. But then I'm saying I'm reciprocated in my relationships. That is a very conscious move, right? We love people. We expect some loving back. That's something we consciously do, right? And then feeling confident and worthy is the subconscious part where I want to program that, because I am not always confident. I am not always feeling worthy. That all of us go through this, right? No matter how achieved, how much accomplished we may have, or we might be CEOs of the largest companies, we still have that feeling occasionally we don't feel worthy or we don't feel confident, right? So we want to kind of program that into our subconscious. So let's so when you do this, and as a practice, you can write this down 20 times, 30 times, that can help. Or you meditate on it. You just kind of repeatedly hear it, you repeatedly feel it, and you see it. And so if you keep saying, I am assertive and reciprocated in my relationships, feeling confident and worthy, it's amazing what is going to start happening. Because unfortunately, we are programmed. We have been programmed, even coming to work in the morning, like we are programmed that we should go to work every morning. In fact, when we don't work, we feel guilty because we're programmed. And that doesn't mean that going to work every day is the right thing to do, or going from 8 to 6 or whatever the schedule is. That is, so our subconscious has been programmed a certain way, right? And back to your thing, John, about unmet needs, right? That's where our subconscious got programmed. And that's where the reprogramming needs to happen. Because the thing that, was most interesting for me to learn was that the conscious mind has rationality attached to it, right? So as a conscious self, we can make rational decisions about, well, I'm not going to go steal this thing, or I'm not going to just push somebody or kill somebody because I don't like them. That's a rational decision. The subconscious mind, however, does not have any rationality. It does not know. So if you think about a certain thing, it thinks that is reality. If whether you see it happening or you think it, the subconscious takes it all as the same. It does not have a rationality. So if you're thinking some really bad things and programming it, it'll take it all as that's fine. That's all good. So that's why our subconscious is a very powerful place for us to kind of really think about how do we reprogram that. Yeah, go ahead. You have some thoughts?
Yeah. So is this, I love what you're saying, the conscious and the subconscious, and you and I've talked a little bit about this as well, but is that where you can see, so we're talking about working on those things, right? Actively working on those pieces that we know we need to kind of bring up and focus on because we see that there's a lack there. But when we have individuals that we interact with that you can see, right, where that subconscious is affecting their day to day, like their outcomes, the way they show up, their vibration, their interaction with others. But if they're not in the space to work on it, I guess, then we're kind of sitting at the same place all the time at
Yes.
the same vibration. Am I saying that correctly?
No, absolutely. And it is all about working on ourselves, right? That's the know thyself. I mean, the ancient Greeks, ancient scriptures, even in the East, they talk about that all the time. It's about, the Vedas is even more terse. It's just, I am, I am that. And so it all boils down to that. At the end of the day, if you're not able to work on yourself, you will stay where you are. I mean, there was a time when I would think, oh, and all these elders I'm meeting, in the 60s or 70s, they must be more spiritual. They must have more understanding, but they don't. Most of them I meet they have not moved at all in their spiritual journey because they refuse to go under the surface. They whether it's ritualistic or things that they have been programmed, when they were young, they refuse to work on those areas, right? And so ignorance is bliss, right? So they carry on that way, and maybe that's just their journey, which is fine. So age is not a determinant there. So yeah, Robert, go ahead.
So are there any like specific books or like videos that you can suggest to actually focus on the subconscious mind? Because I know like as an entrepreneur or an individual, we always focus on becoming a better leader or becoming a better business person. And lately, like I've heard a lot about the whole conscious subconscious mind, and a lot of our bad habits come from our subconscious. So are there certain things that we can, or books or videos that we can watch on a daily basis other than using affirmations to grow and develop that side?
I don't have anything off the top of my mind because all of these books, whether it's Eckhart Tolle's books or, The Power of Thought, all of it focuses on the thought part of it and really on the law of attraction. If if you listen to Abraham Hicks on YouTube or Joe Dispenza or any of these, meditative kind of gurus, they all talk about law of attraction. They all talk about, kind of they look electromagnetic field, things like that. But I think I have not read a specific book besides, of course, looking at the scriptures and some of those things. But I will see if there are any specific things on, subconscious versus conscious. But that programming, literally does need to happen through kind of meditative things or affirmations because it took a long time to program. And so, there's, I think there was a book which talked about really, it was all about deprogramming. When I think there are books like The Second Half, where people talk about the first part of their life, usually when they're in their 40s, and then it's the second part. So it's going from kind of living the physical life and growing and becoming, successful, and then really finding out, what is the true meaning of life. That's the second half. So there is a book called The Second Half that you might look into. But specifically about the subconscious, don't know whether there's any. I'm sure there are, but if I do find, we'll reach out to you, kind of let you know about that.
And I will add, one of the things that has helped me is years and years ago, I ran into this whole brain sync from Kelly Howell. So I'm more of the auditory person. So I can tell you, Robert, specifically, it changed my life because of everything that was going on. Self-reflection, all that wasn't an option. It was get stuff done because it was survival and the survival of my tribe. So there was no time for any of that. But night by night, just having someone break down pretty much everything that Qusai is sharing right here, I didn't have to think about it. They even tell you, you can fall asleep and we're going to keep. And so each day I would wake up after having these affirmations pumped into me and just magical things would happen the next day, right? Whether it's because I was perceiving it differently or it was really happening. So instead of me waking up and having to grab some coffee or taking a caffeine pill, I walk out and then a blessing falls on my head. I'm like, wow, So then it became an addiction, Qusai. No. So then I'm listening. No, I don't miss listening. Then it led to meditation. Then it gave me enough freedom to start reading. And then the three little words and all these little, in the Kabbalah, all these different things started popping up because I jump started it just by listening to audiobooks. Well, it's literally just subliminal message. They're talking you through it, and they got the ocean and start talking about frequency. I don't know if you want to talk about frequency waves and beta and all that, but Qusai, but that's what got me started.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, and so Robert, as a start, I mean, even if you take this particular affirmation and you say this power 10 times every night and every morning when you get up. So if you every night, if you do that, one thing that people don't realize is that the energy and thoughts that they sleep with is what they wake up with, right? So if you really go to sleep thinking, oh, it's a horrible day, all of these bad things happen to me, well, guess what? You're sleeping through it and you're going to wake up just with that kind of energy. That does not suit, that's not good for anybody. So and that's why, people recommend, and I recommend, is that, you're starting out meditation, start doing it at night. Because they'll say, oh, well, I'm going to fall asleep. Great. Because if you fall asleep, right before you fell asleep, you were in a deep meditative state. And when you get up, you'll be in that lovely meditative state. So if you fall asleep, that's a good thing. That's not like oh God, I did not meditate. No, that's awesome. And even same thing with affirmations. If you say these things, and just like John was saying, I can attest to that as well, because since I've been doing this for the past few years, it's and whether it's an affirmation or it's an idea that I keep repeating because I am programming my subconscious. All of these things, your perception changes, and the other thing that's changing is your electromagnetic field is becoming more and more powerful. So then a lot of interesting things are coming into your experience. You're like, oh, shoot, this is miraculous. No, this is just you becoming more aware. It was already there. You're just becoming more aware of it, and it's coming into your experience, right? So very, very powerful to kind of think about and doing it that way, right? Awesome. All right. So to wrap up, let me just bring up my kind of slide for some takeaways. Oops. Okay. So on the takeaways, really recognize who you're showing up as. Really very, very important, right? See if you're, showing up as a avoider, as somebody who's feeling victimized, or somebody's being really arrogant. And most of the time, you will see it. If you just stop and kind of see what you're showing up as, or ask somebody you're really close to, and what am I showing up as today, buddy? They'll tell you. It'll be pretty obvious, and fix it. We talked about how we move from victim to love to affinity, from avoider to magnetic, and from controlling to more assertive, be an authority. The other thing I'd really love for you guys to recognize is an addiction. This is probably, if I was to say in the last few months, biggest thing that I have learned and I've tried to apply, and it's changed my life dramatically, because there's so many little addictions that I did not realize. And so anytime you feel stress, anytime you're angry about something, most likely you're addicted to some of it. And then when you promote it, like we said, right, close our eyes, think about it, say, universe, I'm good with it. I'm ecstatic if it happens, but if it doesn't, I'm okay, right? So kind of do that as a practice, and then always, always push for enhancing your electromagnetic field. So whatever you're doing, kind of remember there is this field around you. And if you keep going negative and kind of see something horrible all the time, and you are depleting that field, whether you like it or not. So, but on the other hand, you do something great for people, make people happy, be around happy people, do positive things, even visualize, right? We've heard about these people who were in concentration camps who survived because they kept their energy and thought about all the positive things. And even though they were going through some crazy hardships, it never broke their spirit, right? So if they could do it under such grueling conditions, you can certainly do it. So think about kind of keeping it positive out there, and then that will really enhance your life overall, right? So that's all I had, but I'm open to questions. Let's have a few minutes. Anybody have any questions, thoughts, things that they have seen that they would like to share? Because everybody has experiences that they learn from.
So if somebody want to dive into all this today, like they jump on later on, they watch this, what do you recommend is the first step? And let's give a persona to this person. They're a high-strung small business owner. Their revenue's under $1 million. They're at 900,000. They've been stressing out. They're kind of doing it all. They're a type A personality driven. They're part of every association, every group. Their biggest why is their family. That's what they tell themselves, right? So, and what would you say to them to bring them off of that high level, non-connected, everything moving the directions we didn't want with those three things of, just the super controlling, the victim, and the avoidance?
Right. Well, first thing I would suggest is to meditate. And you don't have to be on a hilltop in a resort to meditate. You can meditate on music. I mean, if the myth about meditation is that, oh, you gotta stop thinking. Well, you can't do that. So the idea is to focus on something that's inconsequential. So whether it's a music or guided meditation or whatever it is, people can walk and meditate, people are cycling, running, whatever makes you feel like you're in the flow, and you can just focus on this one thing is when you'll meditate. And what that will allow you to do is really, like I said earlier, it's going to remove all the resistance in your life, and it's going to open up channels, right? So people say, I don't have time. Well, if you don't have time to meditate for 10 minutes, then you probably need to meditate for an hour. Okay. Because, all of us, no matter how busy we are, no matter how big a business we have, if you don't take care of yourself, you're really not going to take care of anybody else, right? It's that old adage, right? If you don't love yourself, how can you possibly love anybody else, right? And so that would be my first thing. And in that itself is the know thyself, right? Because you really have to know who you are. Because what happens is, when, as entrepreneurs, that particular persona that you were talking about, we're so singularly focused on whether it's a revenue growth or EBITDA growth or what have you, is when the ego tends to have taken over and you think that you can achieve anything. And to some extent that becomes an addiction, right? You say, oh, I've got to get a million mark, then I've got to get the 2 million mark. Because when you get to 1 million, that's not good enough. Then you get to 2 million, that's not good. That's an addiction. And so recognize that. But knowing thyself, so, personas that we talked about, avoider, victim, controlling, those are indications. But then go deeper to understand, why do you come up that way? Why do you always show up that way? And, that's kind of where your unmet needs will, you'll unpack those. And once you meet those, so identity is who am I? But then if you meet your unmet needs, that's when you solve the problem. And all of that, I mean, you can read a lot of books and you can go to all these seminars. At the end of the day, you have to do the work. You can't, take all these drugs and, go to the shaman guys and do all that. And, you may have a few moments of clarity, but you still got to do the work. You still got to do the meditation. You still got to work on yourself. That's the only way to get where you're going. There is no easy formula.
I love that you just said that, Q. We talked about that yesterday a little bit,
Yeah.
because you're right. A lot of what we're doing is the mental wellness and personal growth, and you can't grow by or get stronger or solve any problems by just going to a quick fix.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love that you just said that, trying to figure out where that subconscious is, working on that. And that's not always easy work. I would like to say you and I chatted, it was probably 2 years ago when we had this conversation. And I thought it was incredibly valuable that you looked at me and you were like, Johanna, just meditate for 10 minutes. Like you can get a lot accomplished in that amount of time, 10, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Just whenever you have a break, go do it. I'm going to tell you that was incredible advice, because to this day, I do that whenever I have a break.
Yeah.
And just kind of shutting your mind down and recentering. It's so cleansing and it's helpful, especially when maybe you're dealing with a stressful day or situation. So I want
Yeah.
to thank you for that, and just share that advice with anybody who's listening, that, like you said, that 10 or 20 minutes just to kind of recenter
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
can be beneficial.
No, absolutely. And in fact, I'll share a personal story. So, I do that. I meditate, all the time. 20 minutes is what I start with in the morning, and then I'll meditate during the day whenever I get a chance, or I'm eating or walking sometimes. And there was a time about 2 or 3 years ago, very similar to kind of situation John was talking about. Is I was at a very difficult time building the business, and the momentum, right, is what happens to us. This momentum kind of just steamrolls us, right? It just, there's so much momentum of life is that we don't know where to stop. And so I was at a point where I could not meditate. There was so much momentum in my life. It's like, man, what is happening? I can't even meditate. And then because I couldn't meditate, it just got worse and worse. And so I met one of these gurus. He has an ashram in California, and I was just sitting and chatting with him, and he was here for a discourse. And I was telling him, this is what I'm facing. And he said, Qusai, what you need to do is you need to do an hour or hour and a half meditation. It's like, really? That's what you're going to tell me? So I said, okay. I mean, he's a Himalayan monk, right? He's really learned. And I said, okay, well, I took his advice. And so for the next week, I meditated for like an hour and a half. It completely changed my life, because it essentially took away the momentum, which was almost like a big rock crawl underneath it, because I couldn't get out anymore. And so sometimes when they say if you don't have time to meditate for 10 minutes, you need to meditate for an hour, it's true. I have experienced it myself. And sometimes if it gets overwhelming, you just have to do longer meditations, because you will find out a lot of things when you're quiet, you're silent, and you know I think there's a mention in the Bible about that too, is when you're really silent, God comes and talks to you. So I think, think about that, and maybe there are new things will come into your life. That's what I'm hoping.
And if I could just have you pivot on that just a little for this one other market segment that I know is very prominent, in that what steps, advice, guidance, mindset, perceptions would you give to the spouse, whether it's the male or the female, who is watching someone slip into decline? And one of our speakers earlier said, you don't tell people, you show them. But if I'm to see my significant other meditating, I'm like, oh, it must be nice to be wasting time. And then I go out and run myself, ragged. So what advice would you give for that spouse of either side to help them kickstart the things that you're saying with the person they care about?
So are you saying, how do you get your spouse to start recognizing the energies and recognizing spirituality?
Yep.
Again, I think whoever said that earlier, it is, words don't teach. We have to learn by experience, right? So being a role model. So for me, if you are kind, and if you are, you show compassion, you show love, when you do all those things and you attribute it to the fact that you meditate, the fact that you realize this while you're meditating. So a classic example would be, I was meditating about a certain thing, and then the cosmos makes you hear the same things, and I heard another spouse, another wife, tell me that, the reason I feel so much comfortable about what my husband is doing is because now we have weekly calls about our net worth and where everything is. Because what if he passes away? Because they have a very large business, and so and she would become the sole owner of this whole thing, and so she was going through telling me that now, because we meet every week and we just talk about the net worth, and he walks about all this stuff and what everything is, I'm a whole lot more comfortable. I was like, damn, I should be doing this with my wife. And so, so that's the kind of stuff but then you go and tell them that I meditated and I heard this thing, and that's why I'm doing this with you. They're like, okay, yeah. So if I start meditating, and everybody is not meant to meditate. Some people, meditate in different ways. Maybe it's music, it's whatever you like doing. There are different ways. Some people are very earthbound, very strongly tied to the earth, and they can't kind of imagine, visualize. And so there are different ways to discussing it. But share the fact that you learn something, and that's why you are doing this to your spouse. And so then they will appreciate that.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Any last questions? Okay. Well, my hope for everybody listening is that, this opened up, maybe a different channel, maybe something, because we're all on a journey, right? And, if you haven't started your inner journey, maybe this will start your inner journey. And if you're very advanced in it, I hope it still gave you something to think about. And, I wish you all the best.
Go ahead and close us out, Joe. Thank you for being here today. Thanks.
Yeah, I was waiting on you, John. I was just about to let John know, hey, you close it out. So we're on the same wavelength. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Qusai. I mean, you've been a brilliant person in my life and added so much value. I hope that everybody takes away a lot of the things that you said today, because you're right. When we go so much, and there's so many distractions in this world, we've talked about that quite often.
Yeah.
You finding that center and trying to figure out where you're going, but are you going at it in the right way? I love the victim, avoider, controlling, and taking that, but what persona do we want to be? Like, I really like that, because that's something you can tangibly think about and move forward with. The meditation, just making sure that you dive into that vibration. We've walked into rooms and you've looked at me and said, what's going on? Because you're amazing at being able to feel that energy and understanding where people are coming from. So when you are the ideal person to talk about this and to have this discussion. So I really appreciate you. I appreciate you for who you are, how you show up, and your authenticity. And just thank you for being an amazing person.
Well, thank you. Thank you for calling. This was lovely chatting with all of you.
Okay.